Hi everyone, this is Javier Gutierrez. I'm one of the founders of Classicspark, and today I'm really happy because we're going to be talking with Daniel Ben Pienaar. I believe one of the most exciting, astonishing pianists out there. Pretty strong statement, I know, but I encourage you to Google, go to any of the streaming platforms, listen, and I'm pretty sure you will agree with me there. He has recorded the whole Beethoven, Schubert, Mozart sonatas, the Goldberg Variations, Well-Tempered Clavier, and many other. And today we're going to be talking about those recordings, his future ones, his vision, and much more. So with no further ado, let's welcome Daniel Ben. Hi, Daniel.
Hi, Javier. Nice to see you again. Thank you for including me here. I'm excited about your platform. And of course, I'm flattered by your statements.
I do believe them. Thanks for also sharing this time. And I thought to kick off, to get in also in the mood, to listen one of your recordings, Mozart Sonata. Just listen an excerpt, and then we will start with questions, talking. So Daniel, let's talk about your recordings. I've noticed that your principal work has been your recordings. So I would love if you could give like a brief overview of the whole recordings you have done, so we can get a general idea of it.
Oh, you mean an overview of the material I've recorded? Yeah,
Yeah.
or how I started recording, or the material itself, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so I think mainly there is, there are two main areas. I've recorded quite a lot of the German classics, mainly the sonata cycle. So I've got a Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, and Schubert cycle. In fact, the Mozarts I've recorded twice. It hasn't been released, the second cycle yet. And then quite a lot of Bach, the Well-Tempered Clavier, the Partitas, and the Goldbergs. And then the other area where I've been quite active has been exploring music before Bach, keyboard music before Bach, 17th century, 16th century, and trying to find ways, invent ways in which that can be pianistically convincing and sort of aesthetically satisfying. I've also played a lot of Chopin, but I haven't made a lot of Chopin recordings. That's something for the future. I kind of tend to work in, I kind of spend time on a specific composer, a specific style for a while, making my own kind of ways of how to do that. And then I tend to do a project like that.
And with which one did you begin, or which one was the first recording?
Yeah, it's interesting how I started, because it always feels to me that I started to study really when I finished music college. I kind of left music college with quite a lot of confidence about what I could do, but really, my serious repertoire, learning, my serious reading, all that came, I think, after I left college, so between the ages of 23 and 30 kind of thing.
So that's
and at that time I also, sorry?
So that's when you thought of starting to record? not before.
The way it happened was after I left college, I started playing lots and lots of concerts in Japan with a violinist.
I remember,
And
yeah.
we had some success. So that actually gave me the time to study because you take 2 or 3 programs on tour and you've already practiced and rehearsed them. So you maintain that a little bit, but all the other time I was really using to read books and study repertoire, having coffees, and that was a wonderful, wonderful time actually in a way, because Japan is also a great place to do concerts because the conditions are so good. They've got these kind of cultural centers, and many of them have really good pianos. They're well maintained. So you learn a lot. I learned a lot about performing and a lot about, creating colors in a hall, those kind of things. And I played, as I say, a lot with the violinist and also quite a bit of solo repertoire. But I used that time, to really study the composers I'd always loved. So I always loved Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert, most of all. It's very conventional to say that, but that's what I really genuinely always loved as a child. And so I just made a systematic effort to really get all the notes under my fingers.
I wanted to ask a bit later during the conversation, but actually now I want to ask, do you study? I mean, because you're talking about that you had time to like sit down and study, but I remember for a fact that in the academy, for example, once you came to me and you said that you wanted to play the whole waltz, Chopin waltzes for me. And I knew that because you were all the time in the academy, or we saw each other, or we spoke, that you never practiced.
No.
I do remember, and you went to the Duke's Hall, you played the whole waltzes. Of course, no problems, incredible. But it made me wonder how's your creative process? I mean, from A to Z.
Yeah, I think I have the attitude of when I confront a composer, or when I engage with a composer, or when I engage with a body of works, I feel like I'm trying to learn a language kind of thing, right? So, like in Spanish, you've got the 2 kinds of knowing, right? The saber and the conocer. So for me, it's not like it's not like a set of facts that or a process. You sort of practice a piece in, and it's the sort of processual memory that takes over, and the sort of muscle memory. I don't think think of it like that. I think of it like knowing a landscape, or knowing a person, or knowing a language. That kind of knowing that never stops. You always learn new things about it, but that kind of knowing, that's what I kind of try to aim for, so that when I when I learn a set of works, it doesn't feel that I'm necessarily playing the piece. It feels like I'm sort of living the language, and within the framework of the piece, or within the framework of that language, there's so much room for sort of spontaneity. So I would say that this may be a deficit. I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but I do very little slow practice. That's for sure. I do almost no slow practice.
But
if I do slow practice, I do it at the very end of the process.
But you do sit at the piano. I mean,
I sit to try exploring.
And
I like to explore things in real time. So as like a gesture or a shape or something like that, right? You work with a voicing or a pedaling or something that's interesting. But for me, maybe because of the way my technique works, it's very kind of top down. So it's very dependent on gravity, right? And releasing things, or dropping things, or throwing things, or placing them, and that's so connected to gravitational acceleration. Does that make sense? So, and that's a constant. So I feel that if you do slow practice, you're messing with that.
You need like real life. I mean,
yeah. And I know that in a way, I guess that makes one more of a kind of nervous type of player, right? It makes you definitely more insecure in some ways. I think it's more secure when you've got, when you've kind of fooled your brain at a very slow speed to process everything. But at the same time, I think what's lost with slow practice can be, in my case, I feel that is worse.
But does it, because I think I remember as well, maybe I'm wrong, that at that period you also had like music sheets that were small, like small size. I don't know how you call that, like handbook.
Uh-huh.
And I think you told me that you learned music by just reading it on the subway.
Yeah, some of the time, I mean, it's definitely memorizing stuff away from the, yeah. But of course, that the small scores, they don't happen anymore. I'm now
No,
at that middle age phase where that everything has to be, it has to be big scores.
but may it happen that you just read and then you can like convey something like you're happy with.
Yeah, but also you have to take into account, as you know, right? Because you've studied all these things yourself. What does it know? What does it mean to know the Moonlight Sonata? I mean, we know this piece. I mean,
Uh-huh.
it's been with us
Yeah.
for years. So when you actually see the score, there's very little that you need to, I don't know, learn in terms of the
Uh-huh.
notes, memorize, right? So, and so much of the repertoire I play is that repertoire, right? The repertoire that, most people kind of know. So
So
I don't make any great claims for, um, ease of learning. Yeah, it's some things are very easy, and then everything feels difficult at the same time.
uh-huh. And do you prefer recordings to playing live?
For sure.
For sure.
But I was going to go back to, you were mentioning these things at college. I think you forgot to mention we did study at the same time, right? Or we were
We
at the
did.
academy at the same time,
We
right? So
did,
that's
but you
that's why
were
you're talking about the past, about our shared past.
exactly. But you were doing, I think, some sort of like doctorate studies or something like that.
Yeah, and then I think I'd already finished my master's, and then you came to do a postgraduate. That's exactly or how we met. Yeah, those days of being a student, right?
Yeah.
You got the freedom to study and think about things. Nowadays, it's so different, right? The young students, they all sort of get pressured into doing their social media accounts and sort of promoting themselves already, even when they don't know what they're promoting yet.
It's
It's
more
very
about
disturbing.
image.
I'm really happy I had that longer sort of learning. I mean, I only started, you asked about when did I start recording? My first recording was when I was 29.
29.
The Well Tempered Clavier Book 1.
Uh-huh.
And that was because I started playing it to friends, and in those days where you had a sort of mini disc recorder, and
Mhm.
I gave that to the person who's now the principal at the academy, Jonathan Freeman Atwood,
Mhm.
and he's a recording producer. And because he is just as interested in Bach as I am, I thought I just wanted to share with him that I'm playing the Well Tempered One, and he then thought, okay, this is really interesting. This would record well.
Uh-huh.
We made like the cheapest recording ever, and we just used what was there in the Duke's Hall,
Duke's Hall.
the recording, the concert venue of the academy. We just put the microphones on, and the engineer of the academy helped, and yeah, I just played it for 2 days, and there we were, and I made the recording. So
2
from
days.
then on, I realized I really just enjoy that process. I mean, there are many reasons. You asked why I prefer recording. I mean, I guess
Yes,
I guess you could say all the
interesting.
reasons Gould preferred it, right? But I mean, that's probably the only thing I really have in common with him. I mean, he's such a specific musician, and in some ways so extremely gifted in very particular ways, right? But I think recording gives me the chance to, I don't know, be precise in a way about. I don't mean the notes. I mean a kind of precision of communicating, and kind of documenting what you're doing, even when you're being very spontaneous in the recording studio, right?
But it's interesting that you say that because I would imagine if you're doing, for example, the whole tempered clavier, that you would take long and you would need like a lot of time to convey that message to have it really specific. But in your case, you recorded in just 2 days, so it's almost like playing in person.
No, but I think it's like what you said before. When we talked, it was like the idea if you know something, if it's a language you speak, right? You don't. I don't feel sort of pressured to it's not like a pre-packaged performance. I'm just trying to deliver as precisely as I can. I don't mean that kind of precision. I mean, if you know the thing, you go in there and you play as if it's a holiday, right? You play with spontaneity and with joy and with freedom, and you just get loads of stuff on tape. So the Wild Temper Clavier one is about 2 hours long, or 1 hour and 45 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You play and you decide afterwards what you're going to use. So to have that freshness, you know,
So
I just play with spontaneity, knowing the thing. I mean, you in that way you have to be better prepared than for a concert, because in a way, in a concert, you need to put up some safety nets, right? So there are some things which you have to kind of harness in a particular way. In the studio, you can take the risks.
Don't you miss like the energy you get from the public?
I do that, but I'm not very cynical about what the public actually perceives. And that's absolutely fine. You know, I mean, I've been to many concerts, and I know the sort of spread of opinions one has, and of course the of course what you can expect from the listener. I don't know, when I record, I can kind of imagine there's an ideal listener, somebody who shares my values, maybe, right? I'm not trying to put on a show or provide a great evening out for someone. I'm actually, you know, especially the repertoire we're talking about, it feels to me that I'm part of a much bigger conversation. That repertoire has been played for 200, 300 years. And I feel I enter into a kind of dialogue, not just with the composer or with the score, but with the people who've played it subsequently. There are so many different possibilities, different versions that one is actually in one's mind referencing. So to me, it feels that if a listener wants, you know, a sort of entertaining version of the Moonlight Sonata, which listener are we talking about? The one that's never heard it before, or the one who's steeped in experience, who's had so many Moonlight Sonatas? I mean, that person is going to have different expectations. Also, I think a very lively perception of certain things. So, I mean, knowledge can be something that holds us back, right? And it can also be something that refines our emotional experience, right? That, I mean, I think if I now listen to Schnabel, I'm so aware of every little thing he does. In fact, I feel I have an enhanced emotional experience. So my knowledge is not a way to lessen the emotion. It actually enhances the. I'm not expressing this well.
No.
But yeah, in recording, it feels to me I can have those conversations with people in the past and with where we are in the present, in a kind of idealized way. And also, I mean, in the process, I feel I'm being very realistic about what audience expectations are. And maybe I feel I don't necessarily provide the best show.
Yeah, I was wondering if, like in my case, when I go out to play, and there's public, there's a sort of tension and nervousness as well that makes me be more hyped and also like feel more even. And that sort of energy I was also referring to, if you don't miss during a recording session.
I think you can generate it in a recording session if you know yourself and if you use the time in the right way, right? I mean, sometimes the excitement comes from just playing through a piece without stopping, right? Or getting into a momentum or getting into a groove. What I feel suspicious about when it comes to that kind of hyper adrenaline situation of live performance, sometimes I think there's a sort of feeling that you go for broke, right? I mean, I hear that a lot in concerts. It feels either people are going for broke because they're in this enhanced state, or they practiced so hard to control that, right? So there's a feeling that they put safety nets up, or that everything is somehow, or then people who perform a lot, it feels as if they're kind of zoned out. They're not living it anymore. So there are all these things that I feel are bad about live performance, but okay, of course it can be exciting. I always feel that by the time the second half comes around, I'm happy. Right?
So it was kind of random that you started doing recordings, but then you got like really into it, no?
yeah, and I think it suits my playing style. It suits the kind of spontaneity I am after, within the framework of thinking very carefully about what is the language, what is this, if you like, call it the style I'm going for. And I don't mean style in the sense that musicians get taught style. I mean, what are the permutations, what are the techniques, what are the expressive techniques I've worked on in this language to be able to express the widest variety of things. And that's what a cycle does. I mean, that's why I love to do the cycles, because it feels to me that if you are playing, I recorded the Haydn sonatas 2 years ago, and there are so many minuets, and they are absolutely fantastic and so entertaining and beautiful and sometimes funny and sometimes very sincere, sometimes very tender. But if you have to play all those minuets, you can't default to a idea of what is the correct style to play a minuet. You actually have to ask, what are the 20 different characters of these minuets? What are the 20 different tempos or the 20 different gestural languages that you want to use, right? So cycles make you think very specifically about those things. And if you have a limited style in which you play it, it will be very boring. And you hear a lot of that, don't you? You hear quite a lot of, especially with the German classics, you hear a lot of people defaulting to stylistic conventions.
Actually, talking about conventions, do you agree? Because I've seen a lot in internet when they speak about you, even I think in Spotify, it says, and he's known for the unconventional performances of conventional works. Do you feel yourself that you play unconventionally?
No, I mean, I feel it's just how I hear it, right? At the same time, I would say that I have strong feelings about when I hear other people play, or when I hear, say, historical players play. I have strong feelings of like or dislike. And so I, especially in the repertoire that I feel close to, I always feel, oh no, it should be done differently. Not because I'm trying to be different, but because I just strongly feel that. Although I think trying to be different is not as bad a thing as people sometimes say it is. You know, in conservatoires, you know, the background, we're always told, well, you can't try to be different. That will be just a caricature or like a cartoon. But actually, I think for some people's personalities, it's very important to establish their individuality. And I think that should be encouraged. I mean, none of the great composers we love, I can't imagine Beethoven trying to be conventional, can you?
Not at all.
I think he's deliberately actually trying to be sometimes rebellious or going against the grain. Sometimes not just because of, sometimes I think literally because he wants to try it out. He wants to experiment with things.
I don't know if unconventional then is a word, but I do feel that your playing is very different. I mean, from like general piano playing, I would say it's very, very, very different. But when I try to relate that to someone, for example, in the past, it's kind of hard because I don't feel there's like models. For example, how you treat the agogic, or agogics, I don't know how you say it in English exactly, but the rhythms, the phrases, you really have a lot of like fantasy, flexibility, and do you feel that you are doing like a statement when you perform? Like this is something new?
No, I mean, you're making it sound really grand or really kind of. Look, it's a very niche field, right? Playing the piano, playing classical music. No, as I told you, I think I'm having a kind of internal dialogue, if you like, with, and I think I'm very. I think I've done quite a lot of careful listening in my time to people in the past, and it's definitely an inspiration. But I think the way you assimilate the things you learn from those old recordings, or maybe even from more recent things like period performance or period instruments, right? I think the way you assimilate those things is a complicated process. And I think ideally, you assimilate things and then it looks different from what you Otherwise, it looks like a caricature, right? It looks like, for example, if you're fascinated by something Corto does, of course you are not Corto. You don't live in Corto's world. Our zeitgeist is quite different. Even their view of the composer, or their relationship to the past, is quite different from ours, because we've had another 100 years of recording since then, almost, right? So if you are fascinated by Corto and you want to learn maybe a technique that he uses, some sort of hand split or some kind of rubato thing that he does, you do it in a very contained way, in a very isolated way. And you've got to acknowledge that's isolated. You're not trying to be like Corto. And the way you assimilate this over time, you've got to put it into a much bigger picture, right? Your own personality, your own temperament, your own inclinations. But I really resist this idea. I mean, you went to conservatoire as well. You know, at least when we were taught, I think we were simply taught not to copy. Sometimes we were told even not to listen to recordings before you know a piece, which I find absolutely ridiculous, to be frank, because what specialist, what expert, right, in a craft is not going to copy? It's absolutely fundamental to any kind of craft.
And actually, it's impossible to copy as well, no? Because of what you were saying.
Yeah, it's impossible to copy, and it's impossible not to copy. You know what I mean? It's sort of the...
To copy exactly. To copy exactly as someone, no? Because you need to be that person in order to...
Exactly, and I think that's the joy of it, isn't it? So when people say they don't copy historical recordings, the question is, what do they copy, right? So I think what we do here is a lot of copying of certain conventions that are recent, right? The tendency is to copy recent conventions, or to copy your teacher, or to copy things you got in masterclasses or something, imperfectly, which is necessary. But still, I mean, why copy just that? Why not learn from acknowledged masters? If you told me that you're very interested in chess. I mean, chess players fanatically study the great games, don't they? So, I mean, jazz players have a note by note copying of improvisations of great jazz players. You know, they learn by copying, they acknowledge it.
And actually, if we accept the fact that we are part of a big convention, like the way we play, that we're searching for originality, but actually we are, even without being conscious probably, but we are copying constantly because of what we heard since we were kids, of recording, our teacher, what you were saying. So it is a fact that we copy, and we are part of a convention.
Yeah. And I think we're lucky that we are engaging with an activity that's complex enough that you can, there's so many materials you can reference. The repertoire is so big. The history is already sufficiently long on the human scale, right? That we kind of almost feel we are using this very strange niche thing, which is to play these scores written by a few dead people, that we use that as a way to sort of understand the world we live in, or understand ourselves. I think that's a very kind of liberating thought. So that kind of private, in a way, communion or a kind of conversation with the past, the present, with all these figures from the past. That, one of the reasons I love recording, because it feels to me that when I record and I forget the microphone's there, I am, in a way, what you get is the microphone eavesdropping on you having that conversation, or it's sort of eavesdropping on your daily musicianship, the kind of daily bread of music making. And I love that about recording, that it can capture that, which is so different. Like you say, it's quite different from the kind of high-pitched concert experience. Yeah. And also in this German repertoire, right? It's how much of it is, okay, there are things like Appassionata, right? That where if you want to do like a really kind of hellish, kind of intense performance of that work, you need to find that in yourself, right? You need to do the kind of method acting to get into that. And I guess maybe live performance helps you to do that. And for most of the repertoire you and I love, they're not really written, the pieces were not really written for big halls or anything like that, right? It was actually in a room, meant to be played in a room.
So when you do record, you are thinking about people.
Mm.
You are
That
thinking
you know.
about. No, going back to the subject of originality, copying, and personality, because we develop our personalities with those things. Where do you think your personality as a musician, your outcome, has grabbed the sources from, or your inspirations, musicians, or experiences, maybe? I don't know.
You come from the southern hemisphere as well, right?
Yeah.
And so do I. I think it kind of, I mean, there are many disadvantages of not having this kind of early education, right? Like if you're a talented kid and you get picked up early in a European capital or something like that, right? And there's access to this kind of intense training early on, and you become this little gymnast or something, and that gets sort of hardwired into your physiognomy and also into your brain, right? And there are advantages to that, but I think there are also advantages to not having that. Of course, I come from South Africa, so and I did not really have any of that sort of intense training. I had a few very musical teachers, and also maybe you had the same experience. When you are that far from Europe, especially when I was a kid in the 1980s, right? So when Europe feels like this magical land far off, right? I mean, there's this whole mythology around the idea of Europe when you're not in Europe. When you come to Europe, it's sort of
Normal.
disillusionment is very great, but this idea of Europe is kind of fantastic when you're not in Europe. And I think that's very formative. So even though, as I told you, it felt to me as if I only really studied in my 20s, but that kind of formative thing of being outside of Europe and looking in, I think that's quite a big thing. I guess it means that you always feel outside, and then you also feel a kind of nostalgia for the thing you can never have. You know, it's almost like the past and present thing mixed up. And that's part of our legacy, isn't it? Of our time. Right? Because even if you are now in Europe, the past is still another language, another country, right?
But in your case, when you thought of Europe, did you think like the culture, the countries, or did you think about, I don't know, just the whole music world in Europe, or did you have like idols from?
Wider, yeah. Yeah.
And
not just music, but of course, I think we are fascinated by these mythological stories, these legends around the composers we love, right? Which is in a way a problem. I mean, it's also a political problem now, isn't it? But I still think there are some values in that music which are extremely distilled, right? Links to do with complexity and how you make something very coherent. It's a set of values. It's not the only set of values that are important in the world, but it's one very acutely represented. I mean, there are not many Bachs out there. It's just a fact, right? Maybe Bach shouldn't be quite as famous as he is, but I mean, he's still, in ways in which one can demonstrate, he's still quite exceptional.
Is there still works by Bach you haven't played?
I've read it. I've not performed it. No.
You will?
No, I think I'm sticking in terms of what I present to the public. I think one has an obligation to only present things which you think are best. I mean, this is the other problem with social media, right? People put everything. I mean, one has an obligation to not put everything out there. So I think I stick to the Goldbergs, the partitas, and the Welcome to Clavier, because I think those things taken together, I could put all my Bach in there. I think if I did more Bach, it would be kind of starting to be repetitive.
Okay. And
the music is wonderful, of course. Of course it's great. But I think the partitas for me are the best suites, and I can put all my ideas about those darts and things in there. The Welcome to Clavier is to the world. It's everything. right? Stylistically, compositionally, expressively, pianistically, if I could say it, the keyboard in just the keyboard, all the historic progressions come up. And then the Goldbergs is this very unique, special thing in mine. Well,
Marvelous, marvelous. Do you have special projects at the moment, or are you planning on doing recordings? Other
at the moment,
at the moment, yeah.
yeah. So, and then the last 2 years, well, how many? The last 3 years have been kind of quite busy for me recording wise. So, in January 2020, just before all the lockdowns, I recorded my bird disc, which maybe we can talk a little bit about, and then my two bird discs, and then the lockdowns came, and then I got interested in Haydn in the summer of 2020.
You got interested in Haydn.
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of sitting on my shelf. The Haydn Sonata. Like, I didn't know if I would ever really turn there, but then I did it, and I had this most marvelous time in the second half of 2020 because I don't know if you know that this famous Haydn scholar called H.C. Robbins Lenardon. He wrote this
Yes,
5 enormous volumes.
yes.
Yeah, 5 enormous volumes with all the documentation of Haydn's life, which is fascinating because Haydn's life is very well documented because he was at this court, right, and where everything was fantastically well documented. And then by the time he left the palace of Esterhazy, he was famous. So they came to London. He had this great success in London and Vienna. So because it was already very famous, then that's also very well documented. So there's this incredible knowledge we have of his life, every aspect of it, and his work. And so during the autumn of that 2020, in addition to my teaching schedule, which was quite busy, I read all through that while working through the sonata, right, which is 9 hours of music. And then I had a venue booked at 2-week intervals, more or less, from September to December 2020. I had access to a small hall at the academy. I think it's a new hall that wasn't there when we were there. And there's a pair of suspended mics in that hall. So I got permission to go there overnight, once every 2 weeks.
Wow.
And then I would just play Haydn for the whole night.
Wow.
I did that until I recorded all the sonatas.
So you got really immersed, no? Because you
Yeah,
read
but
his
it was a
story,
Yeah,
then
it
you
was a
did
Haydn
recordings, then you went to during the night.
Yeah.
Really something, no?
And then every 2 weeks I would practice the work for the next 2 weeks. So it was I kept it very fresh, which I think Haydn must be. And so by in the space of 3 months I recorded all the Haydn sonatas.
This is not out yet, or is
No, not yet. But I've edited it up. It's finished. I'm still looking for when is the best time to release it.
That's something also I wanted to address. You edit your own recordings.
Yeah, I think that's very important.
Wow. How did that begin? Um,
Well, it began for two reasons. Number one, complete control freakery, and also, I mean, it's much cheaper. It's also the thing is, now the computers are so powerful. It's very easy to do it. The software is great. You can do it on your laptop with a pair of good headphones. Some people disagree about me that I'm so controlling about it, but for me, I know from experience what difference it makes even to move an edit by 1 bar or by half a bar or sometimes by a beat. So it feels to me that by choosing the material and putting it together in detail, it feels to me that it's my work. I mean, if I let somebody else to do it, it would only be partially my work.
I understand completely. Yeah.
I feel those decisions are absolutely important, especially like I described to you. I'm not simply trying to precisely put down a prepackaged performance. I'm actually in the studio. I'm very spontaneous. I try different forms of accentuation, different dynamics, I try all sorts of different things because I feel I know the language well enough to do that. But then what I choose to use afterwards, that's part of the artistic process.
For me, it makes sense absolutely because it's like playing in a hall. You know the acoustics, and you get used to the acoustics, and you do whatever you want according to those acoustics. So you
And it's in
know
the moment, it's in that space, in that moment. Right?
exactly, and you know what's coming out. But in a recording, if someone else does the reverb or I don't know, like echo or whatever, then it's something else. No, it's not what you wanted, or it's not what you had in mind.
So, yeah, and of course, it's never precisely what you thought. That's the other thing, right? What we record is not the thing. It's a version of the truth, right? It's one version of the truth because of the way the microphones are. It's a bit like casting, I always say, right? People who look good on camera in real life, maybe they don't look that good. It's how what comes across in that medium. So you've got to have the courage when you've recorded 10 takes. You've got the courage to listen to the 10 takes and admit to yourself which one is the best or which one is the most powerful, not what you thought was the most powerful when you were playing. I think that's an important distinction.
That makes me think about why did you do the second version of the Mozart sonatas? Was it because of this? You didn't feel it was your better version?
No, it's not to do with better or not. I do think the second version is better, but I think there's something kind of quite nice about the fact that the first version is so wild in the fast lane. I mean, I think that some people hate it for that reason. Some people really love it for that reason. And some of the sort of risks I did it with timing and shaping large parent brands and stuff like that. I think the second version is more elegant, even though I don't think it's certainly not calm. I mean, it's certainly not overly calm or overly sedate, but it's definitely rhythmically more kind of elegant from the first. But yeah, I mean, it also, because I just done the Haydn sonatas at the end of 2020, then somehow went back to Mozart because playing the Haydns and knowing them from the inside made me realize just how profoundly different Haydn is from Mozart, even though they always come together. And that led me back to Mozart. Everything always leads back to Mozart anyway, because that's just what it's like, right? And then I just fell in love over again with Mozart, and then I felt I wanted to record the Nikkei.
So you went, you had a trip to Haydn, but then Haydn sort of told you...
Well, that nice. Happened. Yeah. So the nice thing about when I recorded the Haydn and then the Mozart is that, of course, because I was doing it overnight and because there were just one pair of microphones and a nice piano, a small hall, maybe seating 150 people, something like that. I had nobody there. It was just me. So there was no engineer, no producer, and I also edited myself. So it's like a home recording, basically, but on a nice piano.
You could have composed also the music. That would be
quite incapable of doing that, at least at that level.
Have you composed actually anything?
But I'm sure you tried your hand at it when you were young as well. No, I'm quite good at kind of stitching things, but I found that I had no voice of my own.
But you did write down and stuff, or
Yeah.
really? Uh-huh.
But I've done quite a lot of arrangements.
Yes, this I've seen.
Very specific projects I did with Jonathan on the trumpet. So we try to create repertoire that doesn't exist. Trumpet, right? So.
So you were talking about, okay, you did the Haydn, your current projects or like recent projects.
It's been Haydn. Oh yes, the Haydn. Oh yeah, and then I got sidetracked by Haydn because for me it was just the most joyful thing I think I've ever done. It just felt to me. I really have wonderful memories of that. Maybe because it came straight after the first lockdowns. It felt like such a kind of nice thing to do that. And then, as I told you, the Mozart was then last year. Then I did I found some very interesting French pieces. A collection by a French composer called Gaspard Leroux, which was published in 1705. So it's basically sets of suites, very French, that sort of precedes Rameau and François Couperin, right? Well, so they're sort of a golden age of French harpsichord music, right? And that sort of sits in the middle. There's this sort of more old style with people like Louis Couperin, and then the sort of new stuff. It's interests me always when people say they're not playing early music on the piano, and then people play Rameau and Couperin. Actually, that's contemporary with Bach. It's not actually early music. So there's this rich repertoire in the 17th century and 16th century, which is still not that much of it is played by pianists, although people are becoming interested. So in 2018, I made a collection of 17th century pieces from that whole period. And I published that. It's called The Long 17th Century. And one of the pieces in that collection is by this composer called Gaspard Leroux, which I found in an anthology. I thought this piece is so beautiful. I must look at what else he wrote. And then I discovered these suites, which there's only this one publication by him. And so it's this beautifully consistent, compact 7 suites, about 90 minutes of music. And there's something very curious about the score. Maybe I can show that.
Yeah.
So if you pull up the... so this page shows you the engraved score. And it's a fascinating thing because you have the keyboard. You can see the staves of the keyboard. It's an allemande, this piece. The first 2 staves are keyboard. And then the same music you find at the bottom, which is for basso continuo at the bottom, and then 2 solo instruments, 2 melody instruments. And so you've got the same music twice. One's for trio version and one's for keyboard. So what I did with this score, I kind of conflated the 2 versions because some of the details in the trio version are not the same as in the version. So I created a kind of, it's not really an arrangement. It's something that's just very delicate. I've made some interventions, but it's not a sort of 19th century style arrangement. It's actually quite respectful of the textures of the pieces.
But you grabbed from one and you mixed with the other, basically.
And sometimes it's on the repeat that I play the extra voices, the descants or whatever, and sometimes not. But yes, a lot of the dances are binary, so there's the opportunity to do something different on the repeats. So that was an interesting thing to kind of create a score that would be viable on the piano and would sound useful. And of course, then the other thing with these French pieces is to decide what to do with the inégale, the kind of pairing of notes unevenly with the first.
You do this by default, no?
Yes. Yeah. No 2 semiquavers are ever even. So maybe one thing to do would be to play this movement from a recording.
Let's do that.
Another movement from these suites, which I can share with you, because of course it's not going to be released for another year or two. Just as another example of this kind of simple music, but where there's a lot you can do with it in terms of the shaping and the nuances and the ornamentation and the articulation to get something really beautiful and transparent. You can maybe play this minuet from the A minor suite, which again gives you an idea of some of the interventions I tried to do. I mean, there's some sort of register changes and then some added notes as well as on repeats and so on.
Let's listen to it. So Daniel, I know that you have a recording coming up in December. It's The Bird, isn't it?
Yes, the bird recording I made in 2020. Yeah, if you like us to hear me, 18th of November. 18th of November. So now I'm a shameless self-promoter. No, I mean, I think the music is so extraordinary and also kind of technically quite complex and puzzle-like. very different from the way in which Haydn is puzzle-like. But yeah, no, this is a completely different kind of music, and kind of astonishing that you've got this level of keyboard writing at the end of the 16th century, and that was late 1500s. It's just fantastic. Maybe I can share with you two of the tracks.
That would be fantastic. just wanted to ask, have you ever received any complaints or letter by historians, or how do you call historicists?
No, not personally, but of course some people attack that because of course the instruments are not exactly tuned in the way that modern pianos are tuned. And the articulation doesn't work in the same way. They don't speak in the same way. But there are also other instruments at the time of Bell's in Bell's life that don't speak, like the harpsichord, like viol consorts, or cornets and sagbutts, or trumpets, or drums. There are all sorts of references that you can take outside keyboard music as well, right? So this idea of trying to copy the harpsichord or the virginals, or whatever you call them, that's not the only kind of instrumental metaphor. And then plus the music is constructed in such a kind of tight way. It's compositionally so complex and intricate that I think there's a kind of truth that has nothing to do with instruments about the music as well. So the piano is great at conveying all that because it's got so much flexibility in terms of color or clarity. But if acoustically the piano bothers you, of course, just don't listen to it. You don't need to listen to my recording.
We could even say that the piano we play now is completely different from the piano Beethoven played or Liszt played. So if we could argue that we shouldn't play either, no?
Yeah, exactly. So this idea, that's quite interesting, isn't it? That sometimes people do this kind of ethical posturing around the performance of these things when they are demonstrably playing in the wrong concert hall or the wrong, on the wrong instrument already, and then they sort of call on some sort of conventions that have to be executed in the way maybe the ornaments have to be played or the tempo of the piece or something like that, when actually they're playing on the wrong instrument. And then maybe you could argue that the harpsichord, I mean, there were so many different types of keyboard instruments that people freely play on. I mean, and they were very pragmatic about it. So if you turn up in a church on a Sunday where there's just not the extra octave at the bottom, you can't say no, I'm not going to play. You've got to kind of make do with what you've got. So there's quite a lot of that. I think maybe it's better. Maybe this kind of paradox, right? Because on the one hand, one shouldn't be too idealistic about it, and on the other hand, I think we should be completely transcendentally idealistic about it. And I think the piano is in a good place in that sense, right? It's a very pragmatic vehicle. At the same time, you can sort of transcend the idea that it's a keyboard altogether.
I think also it has to do with the fact that we all want to be right, no? We all want to have like our truths and set apart. Even I think about religion with that concept that we want to feel that we have the truth, no?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think you put your finger on something important with that, because I think a lot of performers who play old music, they want to sort of call on an external authority to validate what they do, right? Because they want to be able to say, well, I'm doing this because it's correct, or I'm doing this because there's this book that says you should do it.
Which is probably wrong.
It's kind of taking the heat off yourself, right? You're not saying this is a wonderful performance or a bad performance because of what I do, not because because it's correct or not correct. You're sort of saying, is what you do viable aesthetically? Right? That's the sort of thing people are reluctant to say, or even sometimes they are reluctant to judge someone's playing on those grounds. They want to judge the playing on the grounds of whether it's verifiably correct, or whether it's the right convention, or whether it portrays the right view of the composer, right? Like with my Mozart, I'm interested in this idea that the music is so intricate, and there's actually so much tension in it, because every element seems to speak to every other element. Everything seems so connected with so few notes. That to me, there's a kind of panic in that There's kind of highly strung quality to it that I wanted to make visceral in the way I played. But if you think Mozart is the sort of epitome of elegance and beauty, then you're going to say, well, no, you can't play Mozart like that because
And I think we talked about it sometime, but it's important to admit also that most of the things we think are correct or that we like are just about that liking and tastes, but not really about absolute truths or. So yeah, I think it's admitting as well that nothing is absolute. No.
Yeah, and I'm actually happy with the fact that some people are going to hate what you do, right? I find that quite okay. I don't have any problems with people disliking what I do. And also there is an onus on the listener. Well, I mean, the listener also has to do some of the work. If you know what I mean. It's like we were saying earlier about chess or whatever it is that you are very interested in or immerse yourself in. The experience is greatly enhanced by the fact that you immerse yourself and get more knowledge and understand better what's going on. That actually enhances the emotional experience.
Nothing to do with this, but talking about recordings, what is the recording you are proudest of you have done?
The thing is, I haven't really listened in any great detail to any recordings recently anyway. Because I would say the thing that strikes me, I think I'm quite proud of three things. And again, this is just very small scale pride. I know it's not very important at all what I'm doing, but I'm proud of three things. I think the Gibbons recording has kind of a freshness, which I think it probably has to do just with the fact that I was young and excited to do it, and it was the first early music recording I made. And I think that freshness is still there. And then I was quite proud in a weird way about my Beethoven sonatas, which might surprise some people because in a way it's the roughest recording I've made. It's in a way the most inconsistent. I don't know. But I think it captures the kind of wildness and intensity, which I think is quite difficult to do in recording. And I think I'm kind of proud of that. Sorry. Although at some point I would like to record them again. Maybe in better conditions. The recorded sound was not good. But then I think the recent thing I enjoyed the most was definitely the Haydn. I'm proud of the kind of transparency and the real clarity and the precision of every micro detail. I think that kind of pleased me. But I don't know. I mean, maybe it's all bad anyway.
When you said the wildness, was it Beethoven's wildness or yours?
No, mine.
Oh, yours.
Yes.
That's good. With which one would you like to? Because I would like to finish listening to one of your recordings. Which one of those three?
You can have 2 tracks. Can you do 2 tracks?
You can have 2 tracks.
I would just put a track. I think I sent you a few of the Haydn tracks. You can choose anyone that you like. And, maybe if you want that kind of a crazy wild performance, maybe the first movement of the Appassionata.
Yeah, that I heard was quite wild. Fantastic. Daniel, it's been really a pleasure talking to you. It's always a delight. And I hope it's not the first and the last.
Oh, I hope not. And good luck with the platform. It's quite exciting. I hope it succeeds. And yeah, great to share these ideas with you.
you.